"Get off that lake or you're going to jail." That's what she screamed across the water, across the fog, while 3 patrol cars lined up on the shore, their lights slicing through the morning mist like warning beacons. I was sitting in my own damn boat on the lake I had legally bought, and the HOA president was calling the cops on me like she ruled the world. And what she didn't know was that the rusty metal post half hidden behind her wasn't just some old boundary marker. It was federal property, the kind that could make her entire empire crumble. I hadn't planned on any of this. After Sarah passed 3 months ago, all I wanted was quiet, peace. I'd bought this place, a little stretch of waterfront outside Dallas, thinking maybe a lake could drown out the silence she left behind. The real estate agent had called it a motivated sale. The paperwork was pristine, water rights included. It felt too easy, but I didn't question it, not then. That morning was the first time in months I'd felt something close to calm. Just me, the lake, and a fishing line drifting in the fog. Then sirens, the kind of sound that yanks you out of your own head. 3 cruisers rolled through the haze lights, flashing tires, crunching gravel, and behind them this woman, silver hair, crisp white blouse, clipboard in hand, storming toward the dock like she owned the water. Her name was Celeste Fairmont, and apparently she ran the Homeowners Association, our friendly neighborhood HOA dictator. "You are trespassing on private property," she yelled. "You're contaminating our water supply." I blinked. "Ma'am, I own this property." She gave me this tight, smug smile. "That's impossible. This lake has been HOA maintained for decades." 3 cops stood behind her, hands resting on their belts, waiting for me to slip up. I tied off my boat, stepped onto the dock, and that's when I saw it, a weathered aluminum post half buried in cattails. The metal was government grade, the kind used for navigational markers. My surveyor's instincts kicked in immediately. Something was wrong here. Very wrong. When I asked the lead officer for a moment, I pointed toward the post. "You see that? That's not an HOA marker. That's a Coast Guard navigation aid." Celeste stepped between us, blocking the view. "That's just an old fence post. Irrelevant." But the look in her eyes said otherwise, panic disguised as authority. I went home that night still shaking and stared at the pictures I'd taken. The serial numbers on that post were faint, but I could make out enough. I called the Coast Guard regional office and asked for a verification. They put me on hold, then transferred me to an officer named Ben Hartwell. Her tone changed the moment I mentioned the coordinates. "Sir, that's a federal navigational aid from 1952. If that marker's still in place, it means those waters are federally protected." Federally protected, which meant this private lake never belonged to the HOA in the first place. The next morning I drove to the county records office to double-check. The clerk, Pearl, sweet older woman, dug through digital archives that smelled like old paper and government dust. "Huh," she murmured. "Look at this." In 1985, the Army Corps of Engineers transferred 15 acres to a company called Clearwater Development Corporation for $1. 6 months later, Clearwater sold that same land to Celeste Fairmont, also for $1. The kicker: Clearwater didn't exist before or after that deal. Its registered agent, Celeste herself. Someone had built a shell company to fake a federal land transfer. And that someone was standing on my dock yesterday, screaming at me to get off her lake. I remember sitting in my truck, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I'd just realized I'd bought stolen land, and not just any land, but federal property. My savings, my peace, my attempt to heal it was all tangled in her fraud. For a minute I thought about walking away, selling it, pretending I never saw that marker. What if I was wrong? What if I was the one trespassing? But then I remembered Sarah. How she used to tell me, "You've got a stubborn streak that'll either save you or get you arrested." I decided to find out which. When Officer Hartwell arrived 2 days later with a Coast Guard team, I guided them straight to the spot. They cleared away the cattails, brushed off the dirt, and there it was, bright silver under the grime engraved with U.S. Coast Guard, 1952. Hartwell's voice was low but steady. "This entire lake is federal. Whoever's been managing it privately has been breaking multiple laws." By the time the sun set, the investigation was officially underway. And that's when Celeste made her next move. 2 days later, I found an urgent community meeting notice in my mailbox printed on HOA letterhead. The subject line: Environmental violations and trespassing by new resident. I knew exactly who the new resident was supposed to be. The community hall was packed, neighbors whispering Celeste front and center in her navy blazer and pearls, all confidence and control. She started her presentation with slides about pollution and safety concerns, painting me as some reckless outsider threatening everyone's water supply. Every word dripped with fake concern and real venom. When she finished, she smiled sweetly. "Mr. Brooks, perhaps you'd like to explain yourself." So I did. I walked up, connected my laptop to the projector, and brought up the 1952 survey overlay. "This," I said, "is a federal navigational waterway. It's been under federal jurisdiction since before any of us were born." Then I clicked to the next slide, photos of the markers before and after they were buried. Someone deliberately moved and concealed these markers. That's a felony. The room went dead silent. Then I turned to Celeste. "You've been collecting fees for access to federal waters. Mrs. Blackwell here told me she's been paying you $200 a year just to fish." Mrs. Blackwell's hand trembled as she stood. "Is that true, Celeste?" "Why were we paying you?" Celeste snapped. "Because I've spent my own money maintaining this ecosystem, I have every right to collect reasonable fees." Her voice cracked. And just like that, she confessed to 50 witnesses. The doors opened, and Agent Tucker Grayson from the FBI stepped inside, flashing his credentials. "Mrs. Fairmont, I'm Agent Grayson, Financial Crimes Unit. We need to have a conversation about your management of federal property." You could have heard a pin drop. Celeste's face drained of color. The queen of the HOA cornered by the one law she couldn't manipulate. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, she tried everything. Filed a defamation lawsuit, spread rumors that I was unstable after losing my wife, even offered neighbors cash to sign false affidavits. One woman called me shaking, saying Celeste had offered her $500 to claim she'd seen me acting erratically. That was it. I called Agent Grayson. 3 nights later, I smelled smoke. Acrid chemical wrong. I looked across the lake and saw orange flickering in Celeste's backyard. She was burning documents, financial ledgers, bank statements, feeding them into a metal barrel like a woman possessed. I grabbed my phone, started recording, and called 911. When the fire trucks and police arrived, she was still shouting that it was personal paperwork. Grayson showed up 10 minutes later, warrant in hand. "Mrs. Fairmont, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence." And just like that, the empire she'd built on lies went up in smoke, literally. The next morning, the FBI raided her house. They carried out boxes of records, proof she'd collected over $300,000 in illegal fees over 20 years. The local news headline read, "HOA President Arrested for Federal Land Fraud." Neighbors who once avoided me now came knocking, shaking their heads, ashamed. "We trusted her," one said. "She made us believe we were protecting the neighborhood." Months later, I sat in a federal courtroom and watched Celeste stand trial. I testified, showing every document, every photo, every marker she'd tried to bury. The jury took 2 days. Guilty on all 12 counts: federal land fraud, wire fraud, obstruction, money laundering. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution to every resident she'd defrauded. When they led her away in handcuffs, she didn't look back, and I didn't feel triumphant, just finished, like the lake could finally breathe again. The next morning, the federal markers gleamed in the sun, standing tall and clean where they'd always belonged. I watched the reflection of those numbers shimmer on the water's surface and thought about Sarah, about truth, about boundaries, how some aren't just lines on a map, but lines between what's right and what's easy. And in the end, that's what it came down to. Sometimes the only way to protect what's yours is to prove it never belonged to them in the first place.